Hi, I'm Dr. Cheryl Bothwell, and welcome to the Wellness Table, where you can expect conversation about real food for real people. I want you to walk away from each episode feeling empowered and ready to feel good. Let's get started. Welcome to the Wellness Table. Hi, I'm Dr. Cheryl, and I'm here with my producer, Donna. Hey, Donna.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you today?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing well, but
Awesome.
I think all of us need to know. Well, I've been up all weekend dying to know about this puppy of yours. Will you share with us the updates? Did you get your puppy?
I got my puppy. Today is day 7. I got her right after the last podcast we recorded. And she is a little female. She's 10 weeks old, almost 15 pounds. And we named her Blueberry. So she is kind of like the logo for the company, you know, it's all about blueberries. If you didn't remember anything else I said, it's like if you ate more blueberries, then I helped improve your health just a little bit. And so I kind of named her Blueberry because she's like my, she adds a point to my score every day because she brings me so much joy. She's just precious already. Slept all night last night.
Yay.
Yeah. So I feel like I have a newborn, but
oh my gosh. Well, the puppy thing is no joke. It's so wonderful and it's so exciting and everything, but we forget. It's like you block it out like a newborn baby. You block out all the sleep and the potty training and the walks and all the things. Has she eaten any of your shoes?
Nope, she's too young for that yet because, you know, that's coming. That's what they say. That's coming. But I'm literally, you know, it's the empty nester having their first, it's almost like a first baby that I'm actually trying to do it right. So yes. I'm literally like doing the whole, you're at the bottom of the, you know, priorities of the family. I mean, it's kind of like you go last, so she's not spoiled, you know? It's super hard. It's like trying to do litter dog language, you know, like the mom dog would be. And so, yeah, she came super nippy, bitey. And then I just was like talking to our vet and he was like, nope, this is what you do. And he's just kind of moved through how to stop all these things. And within an hour, I had a different puppy. Like she was just like responding, not nipping on me. And I was like, oh, wow, I wish I'd have known some of these, you know, like not think of it as a human. It's they're a puppy.
Yeah.
She's really doing great. So
oh my gosh,
I'm loving her.
That's so exciting. And I wish I would have done the same with my little puppy. I happened to see on your Instagram stories, the cutest video of her sleeping next to your oven while you were cooking. You were baking, you were cooking something. I feel like it was last week's Nutella recipe. I could be wrong. So number one, I'm still waiting on that. I'm still waiting to try that. I'm going to be making it. But what have you been cooking this week? Have you been cooking with Blueberry in the kitchen?
I have been cooking with Blueberry. Absolutely. And it's part of her little training is to have her be in a little tie down every day, like just a few minutes every day and then walk away from her. But instead of a crate, just a little bit of a tie down with a bed. I give her a bone. So I'm like, okay, she's a little young to start that, but I've got to do recipe testing. And so I was like, I've got a deadline today. And so I literally tied her up to the oven in the kitchen and she sat there for literally just fell asleep while I tested. And that was the Nutella on the top of the stove because I was doing my photographing of the recipe. So it was super fun.
It looked amazing.
Yeah, super fun. And that recipe is going to be on the website now. But this week I focused on literally inspired by our son. And he's like, I'm craving sushi. And I am not, you know, that's something you go out and get. And he does it more of a California roll version of it. And so I'm like, well, I am not an expert. I know my daughter always liked it and I've made it a couple times, but I decided I just love testing recipes. So I just decided to go for something that was a completely brand new thing and come up with a way to make the sushi rice and then the California roll and come up with different combinations. So that was this week. And we had so much fun. I mean, it turned into essentially sushi dinner kind of a thing. And I think sushi is really the wrong name for it. So like I said, this is a whole new type of cuisine for me. But ultimately, we had a lot of fun with it where I just had everybody making their own rolls.
Sushi, yeah.
And it's like,
So you got all
brilliant.
the ingredients and then
Yep.
you put it together as a family. So it turned
Yep.
into like an event, like an experience.
Yes, it made dinner so fun. And it was like absolutely an experience, except for I'm trying to video because I really love, I love the food blogs and I love all of that. And I've done, cookbooks in the past, but I like it real. It's like, this is real. This is our hands doing this. We're not staged. We're going to eat what we roll up here. We're not spraying it with something to sparkle. And this is the real deal. And so we had a lot of fun. So there's going to be some fun pictures of it. But here's the neat part of it. I'm looking at it, and to make a recipe, you have to start with knowing what it's supposed to be. So that means I use the sweet rice, which is a refined grain, white rice, a sushi rice. And I had no idea that they were putting the vinegar and so much sugar in that to make that so sticky. And so I'm thinking, just the rice itself would have enough stickiness to hold. So that's what I began to test, is that can I just make it like this, see how well it rolls, and then switch that to like a short brown rice? And can I sweeten that with a date sugar and get the same concept? And so that's tonight. We're testing it with the different type of rice tonight, because then there would be a whole grain in sushi. I just think it might look ugly. So I'm going to play with that one tonight. We made it the regular traditional way, sushi rice, the first time. And then everybody was willing to try it with the brown rice and just see how it would taste. So that's what I love doing, is just to see what I can do with the recipe. You know what I mean? And
Totally. So it's brown rice and no refined sugar. You're going to use date syrup.
I'm going to use date. I'm going to use date syrup. I'm going to use the vinegar. Everything else, see, works. So then I would have all unprocessed whole foods in a sushi rice. So I'm like, that would be really great. Now, I still would eat that sweet rice here and there, but I will tell you, we're going to be talking about blood sugar today and balancing blood sugar. There's a lot of my patients, that someone that's trying to lose weight, someone that's having trouble with insulin resistance, that I would probably not be able to really recommend it. Yet there's so many other good things that are in it. So that's why I'm taking on the challenge to whole grain it and see if it's going to be a mess, and then somehow figure out, because I like them inside out. Do you eat yours with nori?
I want the rice on the outside.
That's how I like it. So I'm thinking if the rice was on the inside, you won't even know it's whole grain. And so that's how our son eats it. But I don't like to taste the nori seaweed. I can't bite into that first. It's just not my personal taste. So I do rice on the outside.
What about soy paper? You could also maybe think about, have you ever tried soy paper?
I have not tried soy paper, but the seaweed is so good for you.
No.
It's super good. I just don't like the taste super well. So I hide it, but the soy papers are great.
It's what you get when you get like a baked hand roll at the sushi restaurants, because it has much more of like a melt in your mouth. But I have no idea what it's made of. You know more than me about these things. So you're going to have to report back. Obviously, we're going to need to know how this goes.
And let me say this too. I added edamame to it because I needed to, and we'll be talking about that today. But I knew I needed more protein with it. And we're also not doing, because we don't do fish, we're doing actual California roll, all plant food. And so when I'm making it, then I'm looking at it and it's like, okay, I'm adding in the shell, the edamame in the shell. And so that just adds a big pop of a ton of protein. I was looking that up, and it's like almost 20 grams of protein you can get from a cup of edamame.
It's amazing.
So I just served that on the side, and I had the California rolls and the edamame, and that was our whole dinner. And I was like, this is pretty simple. I think it's going to be a weekly meal. I mean, it was really fun.
And you don't eat fish. You do eat fish though, correct? No. Or you don't eat fish ever?
I grew up this way. So, I mean, I was raised as a lacto-ovo vegetarian. So that's milk and eggs and no meat products. So I definitely would always have eggs. My mom would be like, oh, you got to have cheese. We don't have any protein. We used to always have to go through all of that when we'd go to the pediatrician, hearing them say, where are they going to get their, that was like a scary thing, where is a vegetarian going to get their protein? And now we don't see those concerns quite so much. But that's how I was raised. And so just a lot of plant-based food. And yeah, I don't do fish. But if I had grown up with it, I think fish, especially the salmon and the omega-3 fatty acids that you get from them, of anything that has a mother, I always say I would go with a quality fish. It's just kind of expensive if you think about, I'm always saying, I don't know if it's a good public health message because of the cost to somebody to get, without the mercury and to get it,
wild.
fresh. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't even know what that costs today, but I mean, it's going to be quite a bit of money. So I definitely would eat that if that was something that I could eat, but it's just not my thing. So we did mango. This was our son's favorite combination: mango, avocado, and ginger. And I'm like, that's kind of an interesting combination. But I was doing carrots and cucumbers and
crunch. You wanted the crunch.
Yes, I definitely. And other people like the mush. So we're making them all different ways. Super good. They don't like the sesame seed. I really like the sesame seed. And so it's great because you can make it your way. And
love it.
So
it's very customizable for a group of people. And like for young kids, when I've ever done like a make your own sushi night, my kids eat the salmon or whatever, but they will just kind of like pick on little, like just eat carrots. Just eat cucumbers. It's like, who cares? It's all healthy at this point.
It's all going to the same place. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
We had a lot of fun with our sushi, rice, and California rolls. Basically, it was a super fun. So I think it'll be a tradition as much as we liked it. And I got a wasabi that was like, I like wasabi mixed with the soy sauce, but the one I got was like horrible. Like, I don't know. I sure didn't.
Is it a paste?
Yeah. So I'm like, I'll be searching for a different brand of wasabi for sure. Cause this is just not in my wheelhouse of flavor. And so, but I loved it so much, but in the restaurant, I really like their wasabi. So I've got to find my sushi restaurant's wasabi for home.
Go in the back. You should go like with a disguise.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm here to check on the quality of the restaurant. You go take pictures of all there. Wait, so you mentioned earlier, we were talking a little bit about, how today's episode is going to be about insulin. And I can't wait to hear all about this as someone who has had some insulin resistance in the past and et cetera, et cetera. But I saw an article and I wanted to bring it to yours and of course the audience's attention because it's about intermittent fasting, which is obviously the idea of not eating for a large amount of hours at a time. But specifically, it's about the idea that if you are intermittent fasting and skipping breakfast, meaning going longer with that fast, it may raise the risk of diabetes, which is so opposite from what we're hearing, which is always, it's so healthy, it's healthy, it's healthy. I need to know Dr. Cheryl's thoughts on all of this. What are your thoughts about it? Obviously, you can go into detail here with the article, but.
Yeah, the article was really interesting because it was talking about a current study that's just been released, and it was from the Journal of Epidemiology, I believe. And I just found it interesting because they're really looking at those that opted for breakfast before, or eating breakfast before 8 a.m., and seeing this 59%, I believe it was in this study, showing a 59% less risk for diabetes for those people that ate earlier. And, it's kind of interesting because that ties so much to previous studies that we've seen, the breakfast skippers. There was it's probably been 20 years now, but they had a survey that they would have that if you skipped breakfast, it would take 4 years off your life. And I always remembered that. And I saw that when I was in school. So breakfast was a big thing. But then I began to say, what is breakfast? It's breaking the fast. But this study was specific at a time. They actually put a time of day on the study. So I thought that was very unique because usually you'll see a study that just says breakfast, skipping breakfast. And it also, if you notice in this study, had a 10 p.m. if they didn't eat after 10 p.m., if dinner was before 10 p.m., and if they had breakfast by 8 a.m. So it's very specific. So that kind of tears up everything of intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting is, eating in this smaller window. I mean, they sort of shorten it slowly, some people coming down to one meal a day. I am not a fan of one meal a day. I can say that. I think that we overeat. And as we talk today about insulin resistance, you're going to surge blood sugar even more. So this researcher kind of brought up that what these study findings weren't particularly shocking was because of the blood sugar response. And so I think it was more about going after people that are eating one large meal a day and kind of snacking a little bit in between. And I think that's why these studies kind of came out that way. But it's definitely bringing us back to the importance of insulin resistance is the 30,000-foot problem. And in this study, we're looking at if we become insulin resistant, then we see that, it's between 7 and 9% of the population will go on and get diabetes, as this article was showing that 1,000 people of this study of 100,000 people that they had a 59% more likelihood of getting diabetes by eating skipping breakfast and eating late at night. So I definitely think that my simple take on this whole thing is we need to consider insulin resistance. When we look at these studies, sometimes we can't just look at what their protocol was and just say, that's what I have to do now. I think what we have to do, we see other studies that show that there was a 90% improvement in insulin resistance, and that means they're improving their diabetes risk factor by intermittent fasting. So there are many other studies that will show the opposite. And I think that's where we come down to nutrition science can be so difficult to interpret. It's what led me to do my doctorate in clinical nutrition, because I wanted to be able to look at a study like this and really dive deep into what was the protocol, what were they looking at? And we just brought this up as a news article for today. So I haven't done a deep dive into their entire protocol or what it all was, but I read the summary report from this researcher, Dr. Palmer Cross, and her summary was, this is most likely related to improving insulin resistance. So
what is insulin resistance? Maybe you can share, because we've all heard this and everything, and we know it has something to do with sugar or blood sugar, diabetes. How could you describe that in a simple, for those of us that aren't doctors?
Well, and that's all about today's topic. And so insulin resistance in general, let's think about it as the insulin is the gatekeeper to the cell. It's how we transport and get the cell sensitive to bring glucose into the cell. So when we eat food, we're ultimately trying to fuel the cell. That's the reason we're eating. We need to fuel the cell, and that's the true fueling our body so that we have energy. So our whole goal is to feel energy, not get that slump, not feel those cravings. And part of that is if our cell, we can eat food, and then our cell is still starving because we didn't get the fuel from the gut to the blood. That's our blood sugar level. And then efficiently move it from the blood sugar into the cell. That's the process of a super efficient, like our body is a machine. And when that is a smooth operated system, which is what everything we're doing about how we eat, when we eat, what's on the plate, when we have that working well, that blood glucose goes right into the cell within a few hours of eating. And by 4 hours, your blood sugar is back to normal. And that's all because insulin did its job. And insulin resistance begins when we kind of eat too much sugar, too much refined sugar. We sort of, we did more than what the body might be able to handle. And over years and time of doing that, we're even seeing young children now get insulin resistance. What that simply means is the amount of insulin that's needed to get the glucose into the cell is more and more. It means the pancreas has to do more work, and we're using more insulin because the cell is getting less, if you've seen the word sensitive. So insulin resistance is when the cell is getting less sensitive, and it's saying, it's like crying wolf almost. It's like, I don't hear you. Now you need more. And so the simple thing of that is when we become insulin resistant, our cell is essentially beginning to starve. And our blood sugar is coming up, and our brain is saying, the cell is sending a trigger to the brain, eat. You need to keep eating. So we have just eaten, and yet we're craving another meal. So it's really important to shut down hunger like we talked about last week, but it's also important to shut down the cell so that fuel the cell. So the cell says, I'm satisfied. The tank is full, and we have the energy that we need for 4 hours. So that's part of today what I love talking about. And I think this is what this study is referencing, is that if we can improve the sensitivity of the cell to insulin, we see all of our overall health and well-being begin to improve. It's not just diabetes, because only 7 to 9% of us, no matter how insulin sensitive we are, will get diabetes. That's your genetics. But we can become insulin resistant and gain weight. We'll see weight at the waistband. Like, that's where I talk about if the waist circumference is above 35 inches for women and above 40 inches for men, there's about a 98% likelihood that will be associated with if we drew your actual insulin levels, which we don't use that as a test for health, and unbelievably. So the simple measure, and in my doctoral work, it was, how can you measure insulin levels? Because insurance companies don't want to pay for that all the time unless there's a risk factor. How can we measure it without any invasive procedure? And it's waist circumference. So we'll talk about that. But waist circumference, you can take the entire population, and I would say the number one risk factor is if someone has a waist circumference over 35 inches for women, over 40 inches for men, high risk. That's your early on highest risk. It means you're becoming insulin resistant already.
And sorry if I'm asking something that's so obvious, but I'm curious. This is something that you said some are predisposed to this. They're born this way, and maybe they become diabetic at 2 years old, but a lot of people, this really is about the way they're eating, about their consistent amount of food. And are there ever skinny insulin resistant people? Or that literally cannot happen?
You've brought up a really great topic, because I needed to preface this with, there are two types of diabetes. I don't even think they should both be called diabetes, but type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune response. It is when our pancreas is not making any insulin. And that is let's put that in a whole different bucket. So they don't even have insulin. So yes, someone with type 1 diabetes, if we keep giving them their injections of insulin, which they will be insulin dependent their whole life, they can become insulin resistant as well. If we say, you can eat chocolate cake all day long and we'll just give you more insulin for it. Yeah, they can start to, because we're just replacing what the body would do. So let's take type 1 diabetes and move that one out. When I'm talking about the genetics, type 2 diabetes is essentially an insulin resistant problem. And it is very treatable, manageable, and reversible by lifestyle. And that's the one we're talking about, Donna, where when I talk about genetically, though, I mean that if I don't have type 1 diabetes now I am just in the insulin resistant bucket. My pancreas is making insulin. But what's happening is I'm becoming more and more insulin resistant from eating a lot of processed sugar, snacks, craving. And like this study talked about, maybe I am eating later in the morning and getting a large one meal a day. Now, that would be tough because we're needing a lot of insulin, and the cell can just start to become resistant because it's getting too big of a surge of refined or processed food. So when we talk about insulin resistance in the genetic side, genetically, 7 to 9% of this group, not the type 1, but the type 2 diabetes, that's the one that genetically you can see some people that will do all the same things and they never get type 2 diabetes, but they still are insulin resistant. And what I find is we learn so much from type 2 diabetes, which is an insulin resistance problem. They make insulin, but their body becomes resistant real easy. They're very sensitive to it. And that can move on into what I call it a 1+ diabetes, but a person with type 2 diabetes can slowly have a pancreas kind of wear out, and they can sort of move to becoming fully insulin resistant. So we want to catch type 2 diabetes before it moves to that. But if we look at the rest of the population over the age of 50, over 50% are insulin resistant of people over the age of 50. And these are the people that actually think, oh, I'm home free. I didn't get type 2 diabetes. So boy, I scathed getting that. But what they don't realize is that insulin resistance leads to Alzheimer's, dementia we're seeing now. I saw an article that was really interesting, and I'm really kind of diving into that a little bit more right now, but they're calling it type 3 diabetes is what Alzheimer and it's really vascular dementia, and looking and calling that a type 3 diabetes. So a lot of very interesting things. So if our blood sugars are running high too long, that is actually sticky blood. I mean, there is literally, think about, I spilled some of the sushi rice sugar on the floor. Have fun with that floor. Now think of your blood and you're eating that, it is actually sticky. So when you're eating a lot of refined sugar, you really need to drink a lot of water. And you have to think about the eyes and the small vessels because they still get the damage. But this is where cardiovascular disease is really, I look at blood sugar insulin resistance moves into cardiovascular disease risk, stroke, and these vascular dementia. And my own father was just diagnosed and with a vascular level and having a stroke. And it really is eye-opening when you look at these tiny small vessels and how what we eat affects the blood and all of that. So insulin resistance is really quite an interesting and extremely important topic. Oh, another thing I have to say that I thought was super interesting, Donna, was I saw a social post from Dr. Mark Hyman, actually, and I thought it was very good. It was talking about that insulin resistance is actually pushes or moves forward aging. He brought it to longevity. And so it was just a different way because longevity is a big trendy word right now. And, we're all looking at longevity. But ultimately, what we're saying here is that if we have insulin resistance, we're set up for a lot of risk factors that will have us live less healthy years. Let's just say that. So it's a big topic.
I mean, it's so interesting, and it clearly is like such a foundation for so many things that we could be preventing health-wise in our bodies. So obviously we need to all pay attention. Now you're saying that most labs, most doctors, that's not something that they immediately go and test unless they have to. So what other than maybe weight gain or the feeling of constantly being hungry, what are the biggest symptoms of insulin resistance?
You're really going to feel like you're hungry all the time, even when you just ate. And you're thinking, wow, I ate 2 hours ago and I'm still hungry. And, do I really need those calories? And I think that's where we began. Last week, we talked about where the diet culture disconnects the dots between hunger and if we're thinking about, experience the hunger, in other words, disconnect the dots between hunger and all of this. So we can sort of, I'm going to call that white knuckle it, so that we can say, okay, well, Donna, you're better at white knuckling it, but you actually are hungry, but we've just trained you to white knuckle it. And so you see dietitians out there, they're all through doing a lot of programs, intuitive eating. It's like, you can eat whatever you want. We can figure this out. Don't kind of go extreme. And I see where everyone's going with their strategy on helping people find their personal wellness and not to feel like this turns into something of rebellion or something like that. But I want to say here with insulin resistance, I want you to feel that and say, wait, let's reconnect the dots and let's feel that hunger and say, do you realize, and I saw this in my Take 10 program, that by the 3rd to the 5th day, there is, I call it post-meal peace. And that should be our goal, to know what is that post-meal peace where we have balanced the blood sugar. That's your first sign of it, Donna. So when you're saying, I'm still craving, we helped people stop smoking. And there is some hand-to-mouth level of smoking cessation. And I learned that it applied so much to addiction, food. There is some hand-to-mouth where I'm sitting here, I'm kind of bored. That's a little different. That's a behavioral side. And there is some element of that we always have to think about. But the physiologic drive that I really feel hungry, and I can't deny that, when we just ate 2 hours prior, the first thing I say is, what did you eat 2 hours ago? And how can we fix that so the next time you can feel full for 4 hours and not have those cravings? So cravings are a really big sign of insulin sensitivity. Abdominal weight. Insulin sensitivity is just really a part of, let's just say it, where if the blood sugar goes up at a meal, and I talk about a blood glucose curve, where how high does the blood sugar spike after a meal? And you've seen these trends or these continuous blood glucose monitors that we see all the time online. It's a big thing right now. It's pretty awesome. Now you can just slap it on your arm and you can watch these numbers. And someone says, I ate an apple and my apple spiked my blood sugar this high. I really like to talk about that because I've really spent a lot of time on the blood glucose curve. And here's the thing. How much should a meal raise blood sugar from before your first bite to 2 hours post? And that became how I did all of my meals, my plate that we're going to talk about today, how to build that perfect plate. It was ultimately the formula of I needed to build meals that you loved the taste of, that kept you full for 4 hours. But they also were very much about balancing blood sugar and not bringing the blood sugar up more than, and my number is, the magic number I found was 50 points, which is really, that's how much a raise in blood sugar from a full meal. And I do
from a healthy full meal. That's a healthy number.
Yes. Now, we talked last week that McDonald's understands this too. So we can just eat a bunch extra protein, and then it's the cocaine alcohol effect. If I have a little bit more of a downer, I can have a little bit more of an upper. So if I have more processed sugar, I'm going to feel better eating a lot more protein. And we're going to talk about protein in an upcoming episode as well, because the more processed sugars we eat, if we want to feel this balance, we can, in a less healthy way, just add a bunch of protein and sort of at least get this not feel as bad or not feel it. But if we're going to eat a healthy food that helps us, heal, helps us, our metabolic health, the ideal healthy plate, when we're thinking about raising our blood sugar no more than 50 points, that's the magic. And let me just add this one other caveat that has been really powerful in Take 10, is that I also, after the meal, when that blood sugar is starting to come up, about 50 points, 40 is my most favorite peak for any meal that we serve. But 50 is my max. In other words, if a meal goes over 50, then, and I measure this on everybody in the program, then that meal has to be fixed. I don't continue to serve it because I don't get my results in 10 days. So my plate, you can use a continuous glucose monitor to if you like to do all of that. But if you follow the food formula on my plate, you don't even need to measure because I've done it for you. That plate hits that goal every single time because I've tested it for a decade. So that's what I love about the food combination that crushes hunger and balances blood sugar. I mean, literally, I've tested it. And the recipes that I put on the website have all gone through that test as well. Hence why when I made the sushi, I added the edamame. Like, I'm always thinking about that formula because there was a little bit of refined sugar in that. So I needed to offset that. So that's the start. And once our blood sugar comes up to our peak, a standard meal, Donna, goes up 150 points. So that's what a normal meal does. And I'm trying to bring it down to 50. And now let's think about the keto camp. The keto camp, totally Atkins started this. It was like, there's glycemic index. We didn't even have that term when Dr. Atkins first began, but he understood insulin resistance. I don't agree with all the way that he handled it, but I learned a lot from Dr. Atkins and wondering how that worked. And this is what led me to, we do need to think about how we can keep that blood sugar from being so high from a meal. So glycemic index is a lot of, you can look it up, you can Google it. It's like we can look at a glycemic index of an individual food, but that's really irrelevant because we don't eat like that. It's the glycemic load that matters. Like, how does that meal work in our body? And that's what really matters. So when we look at a food combination and insulin sensitivity, we want to look at keeping the blood sugar down to 50 and making sure it's back to 0 before 4 hours. When we start to see that, I say one meal at a time, you're moving to your healthiest way you can be. So you can start changing in one meal. I have to tell you this too, Donna, I get excited about it because with Take 10, it was super neat to see that there were times that somebody, it's a 10-day program, They come in, we feed them 30 meals. And sometimes they would have to leave, death in the family. Something would happen that they would have to leave on maybe day 5 or day 7 and not stay the full 10 days. I've found it to be interesting if they stayed past the 5 days, anything after 5 days to 7 days. Every single meal that they ate, there's 30 meals. If they got to 15 meals, 18 meals, every single meal reduced or improved insulin sensitivity. We were measuring insulin as well and blood sugar, but also reduced inflammation by 1%. Every single meal was a 1% reduction. We saw insulin sensitivity changing meal by meal. So every meal is a big deal. And that's why I just began to see that, boy, when people ask me, what am I going to eat? I needed to figure out a way, because I can't feed you. I can't send people home and keep a chef sending you boxes of these foods, that are maybe be amazing. I needed people to understand that combination, that ultimately we need meals that don't raise blood sugar more than 50 points. But we could do that with keto. So you could just eat butter and not raise your blood sugar. So this can go extreme as well. And then we've got to go into what's our next goal. When I say meals that heal, well, then butter has a lot of other issues. Or if I were to eat bacon and, cheese, we see this in a keto diet, that now I can achieve that goal. So that's what keto's going for, is keeping that blood sugar down. My goal is, can we match that, take the best of all of these? This isn't a diet. This is just, how can we take a meal, feel full 4 hours, love the taste of it, and improve insulin sensitivity, look at those blood sugar, hit those marks, and not even think about food for 4 hours. But it's also all the foods like whole fruit, like we get to eat fruit, like we get to eat, we're not getting rid of all the carbohydrates. And I'll tell you that it only takes 7 to 10 days where people begin to lower body fat, because that also adds to insulin resistance if we have a lot of body fat, or if we've eaten a high-fat diet. That will make us more insulin sensitive. So as we begin to, over time, follow this lifestyle, we begin to see some people were more sensitive to whole fruit, but within 7 days, they're able to eat a whole, like the superfood fruit bowl that I put out as one of the recipes a couple weeks ago. They can eat all the whole fruit, but we're not eating processed carbohydrates. So that's the key.
It's so interesting. I love that you have you're teaching people that are listening to this podcast, that are following you on your website and your socials, how to be able to assemble these plates and what exactly to put into them. So I need to know, can you walk us through that? Walk us through kind of what is this perfect plate that you keep speaking of?
I like to think about it as it's a complete paradigm shift. It's like some ways I've described it as the reversing the standard American plate. It's the exact opposite. So the standard American plate is about 90% processed foods and about 10% whole plant foods. And I'm looking at this, and again, we have a lot of different goals from each meal that we eat. And we see the problems with the standard American diet with being so processed. I want to add my philosophy on processed, which will be different than many other health professionals out there. But I consider meat, fish, dairy, eggs, processed food. And I hear the word clean. This is all whole food. And I sort of smile because the cow ate the plant food, excreted the fiber, and they used that carbohydrate. They got all the glucose to their cells for fuel. And we're eating their muscle. We're eating the fat from the animal that they stored. So I look at, you can take sugar cane and take 3 feet of sugar cane and turn it into the teaspoon, I think. It might be a tablespoon. I'm just thinking. I think it's about a teaspoon of sugar. Might be a tablespoon there. Or you can have the cow eat that. And at the end of the day, the cow is the factory that is the refining process. So that's why I look at it like, yes, you can live on this food and it gives us calories, but it is processed calories. So when I'm talking processed food, I am talking about the way the photosynthesis from the sun with the maximum benefit, nothing's been removed, the way it grew. And those are the foods that we find are part of the longevity, if there was a diet, I'd call it the longevity diet. How can I live as long as I can with the most healthy years? And that is whole plant food, unapologetically. You can challenge any kind of study, but you're going to see that the more whole plant foods we eat, the healthier we are. It's got fiber in it, and it has gut health. So we're all trying to, if we're eating a lot of processed food, then we end up needing a bunch of probiotics. And now we see all these probiotics out there. If we're eating whole plant foods, we're getting we're feeding the microbes, the tiny microbes in the gut from all of the plant foods. That's how we feed them. Otherwise, we've got to come up with other ways to take a probiotic as a supplement. But we can rebuild the gut in 7 days on a whole plant food diet. And in fact, I love talking about this too, but in 7 days, our gut is guarded from so much cancer-generating chemicals from foods that we eat, and even red meat. So red meat we see, and you'll see on the score, getting a point for eating less red meat and processed meats, because the World Health Organization has called them carcinogenic foods. So we can actually eat a carcinogenic food one time in a week. So if I loved bacon or I loved red meat, I know people think that's silly how I say it, but I want you to eat foods that you enjoy. I don't want you to think, oh, I have to become all whole plant food. You don't. It's just think about how a 7 days of whole plant food or 5 days guards you from so many of the other things, so that you can enjoy a steak once a week, or you can think about things in moderation. So that's kind of the beginning of flipping the standard American plate, 90% processed, 10% unprocessed whole plant foods. The plate that I created, I mean, we call it the Dr. Cheryl, the full plate, is basically, I look at it as 90% whole plant foods, that you want to make sure that you're getting all of these. Like when I start a meal, I'm building on this foundation. And so those are the unprocessed whole foods. And then there's 10 to 20% left for you to eat your favorite food, your comfort food, whatever that is. And most of the time, that will be a processed food. Even if it's adding fish, then I'm still calling that a processed food, because it is fiber. It doesn't have the fiber in it. So you think about how the cycle kind of works and what the body thrives on best. That's what we're getting on the plate. So then we take our plate. And last week we talked on about take your plate, and I would do this in program where I had a lot of different people, and I talked to a large group of people, and we all took a paper plate. And you take a paper plate and you can draw right down the center of it, and I have everybody draw a plate. So you can do it on a piece of paper, whatever it is, and draw a line down the center. And ultimately you're talking about half of your plate coming from, what do you think?
Whole unprocessed plant food?
Fruits and vegetables.
Okay. Oh, okay. Specifically fruits and vegetables. Okay.
Specifically, because 90% of the whole plate, and this is what you want to start with. This is your foundation.
Oh, okay. So 90% is all that. So fruit. Yep. Okay.
So half of it is fruits and vegetables, but I'm not talking about apple juice. I'm talking about an apple. So it's whole fruits and vegetables. They can be cooked. They can be frozen.
I was going to ask, can they be prepared differently? What about roasted, sauteed?
Every way you make them, just because there are some things like spinach has different, in fact, in some ways, more nutrition value, not raw.
When you cook it.
Because the oxalic acids are removed. And so now you can get some more of the benefit. So there are binding micro nutrients that can bind and with something raw. So I like to say, if about half of it is raw, I love to see something raw, and I do like for me, I love these big Super Bowl salads, and that everybody has all kinds of recipes. But for myself personally, I like something cooked. So I will do grilled asparagus on top of a salad or something that is hot. Otherwise, I don't feel like I ate. That's just me personally. So I do a lot of cooked, just really delicious vegetables and things like that. So any way you want to make them, it's 2 cups raw. And then if you blended it, that might turn into 1 cup. So just know it's a 2 cups raw at the start. And then however, if you took and baked an apple, let's say, and put some cinnamon with it, and that's a dessert of some sort, it's going to shrink. So I'm just saying it's 2 cups of what you start with. And last week we talked about being full was 4 cups of volume and take 20 minutes to be full. So this is a 4-cup plate. Takes about 4 cups of volume. So if half of your plate's fruits and vegetables, that's 2 cups. So I'm always saying start with the 2 cups. We talked about that last episode. The next category is take the other half and cut that half in half. So when you cut that half in half, that is whole grains. And I find that people, they really struggle in getting enough whole grains. So it's just like my sushi rice. How do I whole grain up that meal? And so on the score, we want you to get at least 1 cup of whole grains a day. Super good for cardiovascular disease. The health benefits, when we look at observational or epidemiologic studies, whole grains were very, very important. Also for gut health. So when we're on the gluten-free kick that so many people are on right now, and I really want to talk about gluten, and there are many people that are sensitive to gluten and why that is. But a lot of times we throw out the gluten, we're throwing out grains. And so there are a lot of grains out there. If you are gluten sensitive, like quinoa, that's a whole grain. Oats are never refined. So if you're having oats every day, you're hitting the mark on the grains. Oats, barley, quinoa, farro, all of these are all delicious whole grains. I will see too in my program, I had a hard time getting people to eat it all the time. But if I could have upped my results even more, but remember, you got to get it to pass the lips. But literally, if you did a superfood bowl that was loaded and it was on a base of whole grains, like farro, quinoa, whatever the grain was that wild rice is a really good one. If you could get people to eat that, the results were the best of anything where I'm trying to give you even whole grain bread. It is a whole grain. But we did better with the actual cooked whole grains. Oh, I have to say this too while I'm talking about the whole grains. I think we've got to find ways to cook it super simple. And if you think about the Asian population and how many times a day even, let alone a week, that they eat rice, I just started looking at, they're all using rice cookers.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why couldn't we make our grains in these rice cookers? So I've been studying the zojirushi, and all the different rice cookers. And in fact, with the recipe, the sushi recipe, I am going to put my recommendations for all the equipment. I test it all so that I can say, if you really get into the whole grains and you can just add them underneath your salad or anywhere that you can throw in whole grains, it's probably one of the best things you can do for your personal health. And I think it's one of the most lacking things. 1 cup a day.
1 cup. And is it 1 cup raw or cooked?
Cooked.
So this is now cooked. So it's 2 cups raw fruit and vegetable, right?
Yep.
1 cup cooked, because when it cooks, it does expand, correct?
Yes. You can't really eat raw unless you sprout it. You could eat a sprouted grain, but you really don't eat raw grains too well. You probably wouldn't absorb too much of it. You can soak them. You could eat raw oats, but most of them we're cooking. So just think 1 cup cooked. That's your daily. But on your plate, it's 25%. So it's 1 cup. Or that would be 2 slices of whole grain bread. Like I just got bagels last week, fresh bagels, whole grain. That would be 2 slices. That meets your whole grains for your whole day even. But on your plate, you've got whole grains. Now I want to see, well, I'll say that after I finish it. This is the full plate. But I do have a plate that this is what you want to do at least 1 meal a day. I mean, 1 of your meals per day. So you've got half the plate fruits and vegetables, starting with raw, 1 cup of cooked whole grains. These are the complex carbohydrate whole grains. Then you've got 25% left. And in that 25%, you cut that in half. And that is protein. So now I want you to have a plant protein at every single meal and a healthy plant fat. And that's the plate. So a healthy plant fat, it's 1 plant protein, and that's going to be nuts or beans. So even if you're having salmon, no matter what other processed protein you're eating, that goes in the center of the plate. Just draw a circle right in the middle, and that's your favorite food. So I'm saying that you're now you're eating steak, salmon, any chicken, eggs. That is for your comfort food. but they're not part of the basic of a plate. You do not need them to be healthy. That's just what you need to love life. And
to enjoy.
They're your enjoyment. They're your comfort food. But I want you to know that I still want to have you have that plant protein. That's a whole plant protein. So that is, you think about beans and the health benefits of beans and insulin resistant. They're so powerful. So the type of protein that we eat, it fuels the gut. I mean, it really feeds those microbes. But plant protein also is really powerful in lowering cholesterol. Some of the research from Dr. Jenkins, we'll talk about protein and everything, but plant protein, we always think it's the fat we eat that raises cholesterol, but there's also research showing the type of protein. So a plant protein at every meal, that's your goal. What will that be? And it's nuts or beans. And nuts double. I love it because they double as a healthy plant fat. So nuts are a healthy plant fat as well. But what's really important in the healthy plant fat, you've got avocado, you have olives, olive oil would be in that category as a refined food. I like you to get the whole olives as much as you can. But the part on the healthy plant fat that I think is really important to just say is that omega-3 fatty acid, that we need a source of that. And you're going to see me in the Super 6 smoothie on the website, in our recipes. I'm putting flaxseed in my smoothie. I'm trying to put it under my yogurt fruit bowl. I'm trying to just hide it anywhere I can hide it. I throw it in a salad where you just don't. The golden ground flaxseed, if you get the black flaxseed, it looks like bugs. I mean, your kids are going to see it. You can't get it in. But that's what I try to do because that's what we're getting from the salmon. We're getting an omega-3 fatty acid. And that's why I say, if you're adding any processed food, it would be an omega-3 fatty acid rich fish. That would be my next. If I ate fish, that would be the next thing to add to all of this. But ultimately, you can see here that we've built a foundation that every meal is built on that, and you can add to it what's your food. But what you'll find, and this is what I found in the program, this is only about 550 calories. And people will say to me, I cannot eat it.
It's so filling.
It's so filling. They're not used to chewing like that. So I end up having to blend a lot of it or get people to eat some of the fruits and vegetables in a different, like they're just like, I'm saladed out. So I got so much response in my program that I cannot eat another salad. So you're going to see me trying not to push a ton of salads, even though I personally love a superfood salad. But there's a lot of people that get sick of chewing that. So that's kind of the foundation of the plate. And I think that what's the key here now is that you're eating foods that require chewing, or maybe it's blended, or maybe it's cooked, but it takes up a lot of volume. So remember, the things that turn off hunger are fiber. Well, this is loaded with fiber. So when the recommendations to try to get 25 grams of fiber a day or up to 30 grams, my recommendation is it depends on how many calories you're eating. So I like when you're eating whole foods, you're getting so much fiber, and that fiber keeps you full and it helps us not overeat. So when you're doing this plate, there's two things. If you wanted to forget about insulin resistance and forget about what do I have to do to continuous glucose monitor and know what my peaks are, I did it for you. This plate, you can't mess this up. If you're eating it in that formula, the most calories I've gotten out of it is I've peaked it up to almost 650 calories, like just every food combination that you put in this, if those are all whole foods, and then what you add to the top, this is my philosophy about what to do more. So this is what I'm saying is I would like you, Donna, to add this every day, 3 times a day. Now, if you think about that, I'm adding all of this, and I want you to eat this first before you eat your chicken. Mm-hmm. This goes first. Then you start to realize that those foods are okay, but don't make them the foundation of your meal. And people begin to eat more of the foods that make them well. Insulin resistance begins to improve. We don't have to monitor if you're not the detailed person. Some of us have the science accountant. We want to count calories. We want to count everything. But for the person that doesn't want to, this plate is 4 cups of volume, half fruits and vegetables, 2 cups of fruits and vegetables, 1 cup of whole grains, and 1 plant protein. So that is literally like 10 nuts. All you got to do is put 10 nuts on the plate. So, and then with the plant fat, it's like 1/4 of an avocado, 10 olives, and you did it. Bring in some flaxseed once a day. And now you figure out how much room you have left for your favorite food. And you've really dialed it up. And you're going to start to see within 5 days a complete change and how you feel.
Wow.
I created on the website for the membership the small plate as well. And some of the meals myself, like when I have the smoothie, I don't have the grains. You don't have to have the grains because you need 1 cup a day. So the small plate just takes out the grains and adds an extra plant protein. So the small plate is another thing that we'll talk about more with our members, but that's how we build a meal that keeps us full, balances blood sugar, and improves insulin sensitivity. And then you don't have to intermittent fast. You can actually eat 3 of these meals. You could eat one at 8 in the morning, and you can have one at 12, and you can have one at 6 p.m. Or, you can make it work with your schedule. But I definitely, with our article we started with, I definitely find late night eating or eating just 1 large meal a day. Those people have some of the least success in long-term lifestyle change. And a lot of that is related to that insulin resistance. Some people are having success with it with weight loss. And I think some of that might be that you're just eating less calories than you were before. Anytime we cut our calories back, we'll see success, but it doesn't mean it's the healthiest way to get there. My goal is, how can we reach the goal in the healthiest way possible for today? More energy today. Our cells are fueled. We feel full. We have post-meal peace. We're not even thinking about food for 4 hours, and we're reaching our health goals, and we're living younger, longer. That's ultimately the ideal. I call it the perfect plate and the perfect way to eat.
Oh my gosh. Such good information. I took so many copious notes because I'm going to try to assemble this. I drew a plate. I did a whole pie chart. If you guys are listening to this episode, you're definitely going to want to go to drcherylwellness.com, where you're going to be able to see all of the information here. Dr. Cheryl was mentioning her membership. For those of you that don't know about this, she does have an exclusive membership for those who really want to dive deep into all of this. You're going to get so much more information, accountability and guidance and hand-holding, and it's a really great source of information, plus additional podcasts that really dive deep, like you said, on this small plate. So everything can be found on drcherylwellness.com. And Cheryl, thank you so much for teaching us today. I'm so excited to incorporate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. And we'll look forward to more next week.
See you next week.
Okay. Thanks for coming to the table, where every week we're going to talk about nutrition, longevity, and what it means to be well. If you would like to have your specific questions answered, become a member today to get access to our weekly private podcast, Ask Dr. Cheryl, where we will get to talk about wellness together. I can't wait to see you on the inside.